Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of People of Distinction, the talk that gives an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, peopleofdistinction.org for more info, or you can always email me directly at benji@alcoleenterprises.com. And on the line with us today, we have the impressive M.L. Wissing. We're going to be discussing her amazing book, Lost in Shadow, A Reign of Shadow. Now, people, it's available for purchase through Amazon, barnesandnoble.com, pretty much wherever books are sold, but you're going to want to check out her personal website to get everything that she has in store. Head on over to mlwissing.weebly.com. There you're going to find more information on Michelle herself, more information on this fantastic book, Lost in Shadow. But people, get this. This is not the only book that Michelle has written. I'm telling you, she's been putting in some work, okay? In addition to this, there are 5 other titles. Now, one of which is getting republished, but you can head on over to the website, mlwissing.weebly.com, to gather all of the information, because this is something amazing. The journey that we're going to be embarking upon today is a small percentage of what she has to offer, and you're going to want to get lost in all of it. Now, before we go any further, I want to take this opportunity and point out that Michelle was brought to our network by one of the best advertising firms in the business. And people, if you follow us, well, you already know I'm talking about Author Reputation Press. So for my writers out there listening in, if you have gone through your process and you have invested your blood, sweat, and tears creating your masterpiece, and now you've done it, you've gotten to the end of the road and you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, although one thing you forgot was now that you've completed that masterpiece, you need help moving it. Well, if that's you, do yourself a favor and contact ARP. They're one of the best in the business to do it, and this is exactly what they specialize in. So head on over to authorreputationpress.com today and gather all of the ways that their fantastic team is going to help you do just that. And people, listen, it is an absolute pleasure to have Michelle here on the line. The moment you start to do research on her book, Lost in Shadow, you understand the epic adventure you're getting ready to embark upon. When I say epic, I'm underlining it. I'm emphasizing it. It is in all caps. It's like I'm shouting it because this is something truly magnificent. You're going to be steeped in a fantasy world that's grounded in real life circumstances. Follow me here because you'll see what I mean once we start talking. There's 4 main characters that we're going to follow on their particular epic journeys through this extraordinary world and obstacles that they're faced with that they have to overcome. The origin story for this book is just as magnificent as the storyline itself. I'm telling you, I'm biting at the bit, and I know you all are as well. But here's the thing. We're only going to capture the essence of the book today. We're not going to cover it all. By the time we've concluded, you're going to run to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, mlwissing.weebly.com, and pick up your copies because you're going to understand that this is a journey you need to add to your shelf. And at the end of the day, don't take my word for it. Take Michelle's. It's her book. She's written it, and she's the expert, so she is going to be able to articulate it much better than I ever could. Sit back and strap in. Michelle, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. It's such an honor to be here.
Michelle, you're too kind. Thank you very much. I truly mean it. The honor is all ours, okay? I think what you've done here with this book, but not only just with this book, because honestly, with your collection of work, I mean, this is something impressive here, okay? And I'm not just saying that because you're a guest with us. We are delighted to have you here, and we're so excited to embark upon this journey. My background is in filmmaking. I'm an actor and a filmmaker by trade, and when the opportunity came across our desk to have this book on the network, I'm telling you, my imagination was running wild. I was like, this is something up my alley, and it's something that I just love, right? So to have the opportunity to talk to you about it is truly a delight and a magnificent honor. So thank you again for being here. Michelle, before we jump into the book, start off by telling our listening audience a little bit more about yourself and your background.
Well, I'm a military veteran. I served in the United States Army for 8 years. I have 2 bachelor's degrees, one in general studies, one in legal studies, and a minor in psychology. I started writing when I was about 4th grade and just hadn't stopped. One of my books, The Game, was actually a short story written while I was in Iraq.
Wow.
Fragments was a college project, and after having some other soldiers look it over, I decided to publish it.
Michelle, thank you very much for explaining that. Thank you, of course, for your service. Thank you. Just a quick side note, I'm going to call a timeout here. A thank you never seems good enough, right? The common saying, whenever we're talking to any military veteran, we always say, thank you for your service. And yeah, I mean, that's all we have to offer. So, of course, that's what we say. But I always feel like I'm snubbing military representatives when I say that, because the amount of sacrifice that you all have made protecting our liberties here in the States, a thank you just doesn't seem good enough. It just doesn't seem like it goes far enough. But as I mentioned, Michelle, it's all I have to offer at the moment. So I'm going to say it, even though I know it's falling so short of what you and your military brothers and sisters have done for us.
Thank you so much for your support.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, Michelle, I want to go into inspiration next, because you mentioned a great point, and I know it has some shades of it here in Lost of Shadow, but let's talk about inspiration, because you mentioned a couple of other books that you've written that were inspired by your military background. Talk to us a little bit more about those experiences and how they influenced you as a writer, and where we start to see some of those shades peeking in.
In college, I was in a poetry class, and one of our, extra credit things was going to a poetry reading. And so I went, and one day my brain just would not stop bothering me like a child, going, Mom, Mom, Mom. And so finally I just took a pen and a sheet of paper, and I started writing while I'm listening to this poetry. And I closed my notebook and I put it away. And about 2 weeks later, I'm going through my backpack, and I find this notebook. I'm flipping through, and I'm like, oh, these are all poems about Iraq. And it took a little bit for me to realize it was my PTSD coming out. And so for the college project, since we were doing poetry anyway, I just put them all together, and I decided, hey, put it in for a grade, got my grade and everything. Yeah. I don't even remember what it is now. But I contacted a couple of my fellow soldiers. I was like, hey, do you guys think I should publish this? Because it took you from going into the military to going all the way up until you're in the VA. So it takes you through, going to war, coming out of war, going through PTSD, having a flashback and everything. And so one day a fellow soldier of mine got a hold of me, and he says, I didn't realize anybody else felt this way. Is this PTSD? And since I was a psychology student, done way too many papers on PTSD, I said, yes, this is an example of PTSD. Not everybody will have this. And he goes, I have this. I think I have PTSD. And I said, great, let's go get you some help. And because of that interaction, I got it published. I will be republishing it this year. And so that way it started springboarding my passions for writing, for wanting to help people. I've been in parts of 2 anthologies since then. The World in Our Words, which is coming out this year, and Healing Words, A Journey Through the Ladder Up, which was based off a project from author Silouan Green, who gave us the okay to make that anthology.
People, I'm telling you, we could not have selected a more perfect embodiment of a person of distinction to be here with us, because listen to what she just said. This is far greater than just art for creating art, just allowing imagination. And listen, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with that either. As an artist myself, I love it, right? There's nothing wrong with it. But I think that there is probably no bigger praise than an artist can receive than one of their, I'll say fans in this instance, but one of their fellow fans, or in your instance, Michelle, one of your fellow readers, and having them connect so vividly with your work. I think all artists strive to really elicit certain emotions, right? We want to move people through our art and through our creativity. And to have that be shown, I'm telling you, this is why I knew from the very beginning, this is something we needed to have on our network, because there's a lot of people out there that are going to be able to pick up your books. And even though on the face of it, right, Lost in Shadow, that's taken place in a fantasy world. There is nothing about that looks like our world, except for some of the circumstances that are infused within. And those things are formulating bridges with your readers. I love that. Without further ado, let's jump into Lost in the Shadow. Michelle, tell us a little bit more about the words on those pages.
Lost in Shadow is a fantasy novel that follows four protagonists in the world of Hinestra, 150 years after a race called the Shadon take over the land. Mm-hmm. Apollo is a young boy who's on a quest for revenge. Ratsbane is a drunkard who's trying to get rid of, he's getting these visions of blood and death and at night, and so he drinks to get rid of them. Yeah. Michael is brought down to this territory called Cetra, and he's put in command of this garrison, so now he has humans and Shadon to take care of. And those two races don't always get along. And then Blagden is Michael's father, and he's the liege lord of the area, and he's trying to keep his place in society when his son makes a mistake that ends up changing how people see his son, but also threatens where his son stands beside him, and it could very well threaten Blagden's own place in society.
Mm-hmm. Michelle, where did you get the idea for this particular novel? I mean, what birthed this?
I'm a nerd. I play D&D, and I didn't want to run modules. I wanted to run a game with my friends, and so I was like, you know what? I'm going to create my own world, and I did. And some of my characters are actually based on my friends' characters, and every now I've had a couple of them read. One of them is my husband, and he's read my book, and he's like, I recognize this from our game, or hey, I didn't realize that that's what they look like. And so it's really funny watching this world grow. It's been about 8 years of just growth. I have so many notebooks full of different things between languages and different ideas for races. I don't want to do the typical elf, for example. I have some elves that are coming up later on in the series, mm-hmm. who look nothing like, what you expect the Lord of the Rings elves or, D&D elves would look like. And the same thing with dwarves, and my dragons are different. And so every now and then I'll text my husband and be like, hey, what do you think about this? And he's like, that's horrifying. I'm like, okay, cool.
That's what I was going for.
There is a creature in my book called the Kelvorvik, and it's a mount that's kind of similar to a horse, but mm-hmm. it's carnivorous. And the first time we read it out loud to my mother-in-law, her face got really terrified, and it was slightly awesome. It's not a horror book, but I wanted those feelings, because it was the first time this human has ever seen one of those creatures, and it was terrifying him.
I think it's probably safe to say, Michelle, this is not a book for children. This is a book for some young adults and above, right? Some of the subject matter may be a little bit too gruesome there for children. But this is something, again, I can easily see on the television screen, on the film screen. We are hoping that there is much more on the horizon. We know that this is a series, or going to be a series. So there's a lot of other books set to be released as well. people, again, Amazon and Barnes & Noble are where you got to go. Check out her personal website, mlwissing.weebly.com. Some of the other books to be found, but believe me, there are more. She mentioned one already, The World in Our Words. That's a poetry book you're going to want to check out. There's Fragments, The Game, which is going to be republished. I'm telling you, there is more. Head on over to the website, mlwissing.weebly.com, and get lost in all of it today. You can thank me later. Michelle, I want to delve into the world of the book here for a second. Let's get imaginative, okay? If you could enter the world, and technically it came from a game that you created, so you've already been in this world. But I want to go a step further pertaining to the book itself. If you could choose any page in the book to enter and relive, which page would you choose to land on and why?
Oh gosh, there's so many favorite scenes of mine. I have. I'm trying to figure out a page that would be great without giving any spoilers away. I think probably one of my favorite scenes is when it's around book one, page 100, mm-hmm. and Apollo has met Michael for the first time in a spar. He's like, hey, you have a sword. I want to see what you can do. And as I said, Apollo's a farm boy. He has his father's sword. He doesn't know how to fight. He grew up with farmers. They played with sticks, but, they really didn't have any swords or anything because the Shadon army comes in, they take all their goods away. Mm-hmm. And so they do this quite regularly. They'll go through and be like, oh, this is a tribute for us. We're going to take, your good weapons and your good tools and just leave you with the ones that are shoddy. And so during their spar, Michael, who has been trained by his father, who is one of the top duelists in the Shadon nation, he's constantly pointing his sword at Apollo, dead, 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 every time. And it's ticking Apollo off. And Apollo is 18. He's headstrong. I see a lot of my stepson in him because he gets fired up so easily, and he's so angry because of what happens before this and what gets him to go to the garrison. And so Apollo, in his anger, after Michael's like, okay, we're done sparring, you need work, and he turns around to walk away, and Apollo grabs him by the shoulder and spins him around and punches him across the face.
Oh, wow.
And then they end up fighting. And it's one of my favorite parts because right after that, there is a mistake that is said on Michael's part. And because of that mistake, it changes how his soldiers see him. It changes his relationship with Apollo forever. And so, and it's crazy how one little thing can make, or unmake things.
Yeah.
And so you have this boy who's, I'm the commander, I should be able to do this. And now he's thrust into this other role that he wasn't expecting. Now he may lose everything because of this one mistake he makes. And so words have power, and two little words ruin everything.
Well, listen, how many of us have been there, right? Where it's just that one moment of anger and aggression, and it changes an entire world. Yeah, I've been there more often than I'd like to admit. There, Michelle, transitioning now and focusing on some of writing aspects and being able really to pay it forward to other writers out there listening in with some helpful tips. But all artists will be able to relate to this next one, but let's keep it in the frame of writing. Okay. Michelle, how do you handle the vulnerability that comes with sharing your work with the world, especially in this instance in particular, when it touches upon, maybe not directly, but there are, again, those shades and those colors of it kind of sprinkled in, especially when it touches up on personal experiences and emotions. How do you handle that vulnerability with putting that out?
My husband and I are each other's therapists. It's key to have a good foundation, because there are things of drunkenness and PTSD and everything like that in this book, and sometimes it's very hard to write. I've walked away from writing chapters and like, I need a moment, and I have tears running down my face.
Yeah, of course.
Or I'm laughing so hard, I'm like, I need to tell you about this. And he has no idea what I'm talking about, but he's like, okay, I'll listen. And then, and so having a support is key to whatever you're doing. I've had a reader who's told me, she's like, I liked it, but it was way too heavy for me. She's like, she goes, I like fantasy books, but this is like Lord of the Rings, like fantasy, and I can't read that. And I'm like, it's okay. But then 2 days later, she turned around and talked to me about her favorite character. And so, and so when people don't like my book, I have this thing where I try not to take it personally, but it hurts sometimes. And so I'm living with the mantra this year of, I have golden retriever energy, and not everybody is a dog person. And so I have to remember, not everybody is going to like my book. But so my husband keeps telling me, I'm like, well, what if book 2 doesn't live up to the expectations of book 1? Because I'm 70,000 words into book 2 right now.
Wow. And
my husband keeps going, Michelle, remember, you're writing this for you. Mm-hmm. You're the reader first. Tell your story first. Doesn't matter what everybody else wants. If everybody wants this person to end up with ratsbane, if somebody wants this person to hurt this person, he goes, it doesn't matter. What do you want to do? What story do your characters want to tell?
Great advice.
And so I have a whiteboard with like all the ideas, and I'll be writing, and I'll tell my husband, I'm like, this chapter doesn't feel right. I want to put this character in, but it doesn't feel right. He goes, and take it out. Take it. He goes, don't erase it. Put it into another document. So I have Google Docs of like 15,000. And I'll just put it aside, and then later that character ended up being in the book in a different way. And it felt better. And I was like, okay, if it doesn't feel right, I'm not doing it. And so I've taken out so many chapters. I ended up taking 6 chapters out of book 2 and putting them into book 1 to round it out.
Right.
But it's go with your instincts and listen to your characters. And it sounds weird because the characters are in your head, but they're in your head. They're talking to you.
No, listen, I had another question that I wanted to go into, but honestly, after that answer, I think this is the perfect place to start closing out. Because there was so much power in what she said. First and foremost, having that support system, right, is so key. And yeah, she found that in her husband. You may find that in a close friend. You may find that in a family member. You may find that in your pet, right? Maybe somebody that you just talk to. Yeah, they can't talk back, but just getting it out makes you feel good and you can articulate it. And sometimes just getting it out will help you clarify your own thoughts and your process. So that is fantastic.
I have a friend who is a programmer, and he tells me they keep little rubber ducks around their computers. And when they can't figure out a code, they'll explain it to the duck. Mm-hmm. And in talking it out loud, you sometimes work out the problem.
Yeah.
So I have my husband bought me for Valentine's Day, I have a stuffed displacer beast that I talk to. I have a penguin. I have little dragons all over that I talk to, and my dogs, I'll talk to them. And then when my husband comes home, I'll be like, okay, I figured it out. And so he'll randomly get a text going, I figured out something about my world today. And so it doesn't matter if they can't talk back. Yeah. Sometimes that's the best thing.
Absolutely. No, it really, listen, sometimes it's inanimate objects, right? I mean, that's just what it calls for and needs in any particular moment. And I think that that's a great point to really point out. And, another point that I want to underline and emphasize for our listening audience is, guys, just because you write something does not mean you're tied to it, right? And that's the great thing about the process. And again, we're honing it in on writers, but it can go for artists across the board. I can't tell you how often when I'm working on a film or some creative project, and I'll come up with a great idea, and I'm so tied to this idea. I love it. But the idea just doesn't quite fit with the rest of the piece. So now I'm like, well, I hate to let this go. So I'm trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, and it's just not working. You don't have to get rid of it. Just shelve it, right? Take that, put it away, but save it. It doesn't have to be something that goes to waste. Just doesn't work with that individual project. And I love that you're bringing that up because I think it's a great point for people to always understand. A lot of times, guys, it's best to just write. Just get the words out on the page. You can edit it later on and rearrange it, but just get it out. Start to create. And that's when the passion, that's when that little snowflake starts to roll down the hill and eventually accumulates into that huge snowball because you start to get the momentum. And this is what this is all about. People, I'm telling you, I know you are all like me, okay? You're at the edge of your seat, and you're like, Benji, I'm ready, okay? Amazon, Barnes & Noble, mlwissing.weebly.com. I'm heading on over there right now. Also, check out our other books, The World in Our Words, Fragments, The Game. There's other books available for purchase on the website that you're going to want to check out as well. This is the gift that keeps on giving. You need to go shopping. And while you're at it, get it as a gift for someone else to add to their shelf as well, because these books are incredible. You need something to help pass the time on a rainy day, it's got it. You need something that has some substance, that is grounded in something that, yeah, it's fun, but it also has something that's going to make you look into your life in a way, maybe shift the perception here or there. This book's got what you need as well. Head on over there today, pick up your copies. And like I say, you can thank me later. Michelle, this has been a true pleasure, an absolute delight. Thank you once again for being a guest on People of Distinction.
Thank you so much for having me.